A major transformation is taking shape, and it isn't coming from Washington this time. It's emerging from Ottawa. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Asia tour has just wrapped up, and it's already being hailed as a defining chapter in Canada's global story. From Kuala Lumpur to Tokyo, world leaders didn't just meet another visiting prime minister, they met a statesman whose words carried weight far beyond Canada's borders. For decades, Canadian diplomacy was known for being courteous and predictable. But this week, that image changed. Carney turned what could have been a routine diplomatic tour into a bold display of strength, proving that Canada's leadership is no longer measured by proximity to power, but by the confidence to lead independently. And as global praise echoed, Carney showed that same composure back home, calmly addressing the Ontario anti-tariff controversy without escalation or theatrics. No politics, no noise, just diplomacy. Because today, Canada's power doesn't come from volume, it comes from vision.
With Prime Minister's trip to Asia, attending ASEAN, APEC, and pledging to transform Canada's economy as he engaged with these large economic groups. What did the Prime Minister achieve, you think, Tom?
Well, actually, I think that you're right to put those two together. His trips, of course, were part of a pattern of meetings that are held annually. Canada's place there has been earned over the years. We have trade deal with many of those countries in the Asia-Pacific region, and we're considered reliable partners by most. And at the same time, Carney is trying to signal to the Americans that we have other options around the world. I think that Canada is starting to realize that overall we made a mistake in putting ourselves in lockstep with the Americans. You put all your eggs in one basket, and then you have a Trump who just decides to throw the basket on the floor, then you're in trouble. And that's where we are right now. So I think that Carney is showing the depth of his connections around the world, his experience, the respect that people have for him. That works out very well in Canada's favor.
For years, Canada played the role of a supporting actor on the global stage. Reliable, steady, but rarely the one setting the tone. That perception changed this week. At the ASEAN summit and during key stops across Asia, Prime Minister Mark Carney made one thing unmistakably clear. Canada is done watching history unfold. It's now ready to shape it. Carney spoke confidently about digital innovation, green technology, and the creation of new trade corridors connecting Canadian industries directly to Asia's rapidly expanding markets. The response was immediate and unmistakable. Leaders listened, not out of politeness, but out of genuine respect. And that's what's different now. The world is paying attention to what Canada says, because Carney's leadership has made it impossible to ignore. For decades, Canadian foreign policy revolved around its proximity to the United States. Every trade decision, every diplomatic position somehow aligned with Washington's priorities. But Carney is rewriting that playbook. He's sending a message to the world, and especially to the United States. Canada no longer needs permission to lead. During his Asia tour, Carney met with leaders from Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, and China, positioning Canada as an independent global player, capable of forging direct partnerships without going through Washington first. As one analyst noted, this is a Canada that learned from the Trump years and refuses to be caught off guard again. Because when you place all your eggs in one basket, and that basket gets dropped in Washington, you're left with nothing. This week made it crystal clear. That era is over.
He's also signaling to the Americans that we're going to get closer to China. Now, I think that one of the first things that will happen is that Canada will start lifting the ridiculous 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. That's something that we did to please the Americans almost exactly a year ago. And the Americans were putting 100% tariffs to try to squeeze the Chinese out of the electric vehicle market. All of a sudden, this favor to the Americans got us nothing but grief and tariffs and punch in the head from Donald Trump's regime. So Canada is simply saying, look, if you're going to play the game that way, then we do have other options.
Carney's rise as a global statesman didn't happen by accident. It's been built deliberately, patiently, through calm, steady, and pragmatic diplomacy. The kind that doesn't chase headlines, but earns influence quietly and powerfully. Throughout his Asia tour, Carney wasn't performing for cameras. He was building partnerships. He met with leaders who only a few years ago saw Canada as a secondary voice in global trade. Today, they see something entirely different, a strategic bridge led by a Western statesman who brings logic, credibility, and stability to every conversation he enters. Behind closed doors, the discussions went deeper than ceremony. Energy cooperation, digital infrastructure, and climate-focused investment all took center stage. But what impressed observers most wasn't just policy. It was Carney's presence, polite, principled, but unafraid to speak with authority. And that's what sets him apart from leaders like Donald Trump. Trump tries to dominate the room. Carney earns it. Yet, while Carney's Asia tour was being praised abroad, a very different headline broke back home, one that caught both Ottawa and Washington by surprise. Mark Carney had personally apologized to Donald Trump for Ontario's anti-tariff ad, a campaign that mocked U.S. policy and further strained relations. At first, it looked unexpected, maybe even unnecessary. But to those who understand diplomacy, it was immediately clear. This wasn't weakness, it was strategy, a quiet masterstroke of political intelligence.
Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney says he apologized to Trump for the ad, saying he disagreed with Ontario's Premier Doug Ford about airing it. But Trump has called off all trade talks with Canada, and it's unclear if and when talks could take place in the future. For more on all of this, let's now bring in CTV News political commentator and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair in the conversation. Tom, great to see you this Sunday afternoon. Thank you for your time. Lots to catch up on.
Carney knew exactly what he was doing. The ad had already served its purpose. It exposed how Trump's tariffs were hurting American consumers. But Carney also understood that clinging to it would only prolong the tension. And he wasn't about to let a provincial political stunt derail Canada's future negotiations. So instead of doubling down, he rose above it. He took responsibility, not because he was wrong, but because he was wise enough to know when to de-escalate. That single move reframed the narrative. Carney wasn't the aggressor in this story. He became the adult in the room. His apology wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a signal of maturity and strategic leadership, the kind Washington hasn't witnessed in years. Carney's focus wasn't on scoring short-term political points. It was on protecting Canada's long-term interests. By acknowledging that the ad went too far, he quietly reopened the door to renewed dialogue with the U.S., discussions that could eventually shape a fairer, more stable trade framework for both countries. Even critics couldn't deny the effectiveness. As former NDP leader Tom Mulcair put it, Mr. Carney was right to apologize. He understood the damage it caused Canada. And that's the difference. Carney doesn't act to impress anyone. He acts to protect Canadians every single time.
To apologize to Trump. He didn't try to deny that he had apologized when Trump talked about it. And he explained why, that it's hurt Canada. And so, yeah, the insult to injury, of course, is to hear Scott Bessent throwing even the Blue Jays into the mix today. But, we'll get past that sort of childish behavior on both sides. And I think we'll be able to sit down. There's no negotiation right now, but they are still talking, whatever they want to call those talks. So I think we're moving along faster than anybody wants to admit.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. CTV News political commentator Tom Mulcair, always a pleasure. Thanks, Tom.
All the best.
What Mark Carney demonstrated this week, both across Asia and in his handling of Donald Trump, is what real leadership looks like. He reminded the world that diplomacy isn't about dominance, it's about direction. Carney chose strategy over spectacle, calculation over chaos. While Trump continues to measure power by the noise he makes, Carney measures it by the alliances he builds. Every handshake, every statement during this Asia tour reflected a steady kind of confidence, the confidence of a leader who doesn't need to shout to be heard. That's why world leaders are praising him. Because they see in Mark Carney what modern diplomacy has been missing: clarity, respect, and vision. This tour wasn't just about Asia. It was about redefining Canada's purpose on the global stage. Carney is positioning the nation as a bridge between divided powers, a steady voice in a world dominated by ego and uncertainty. He's proving that Canada doesn't have to choose between Washington and Beijing. It can work with both, without bowing to either. This is the diplomacy of balance, something Trump could never master, because where Trump sees deals as transactions, Carney sees them as relationships built on credibility, patience, and long-term vision. That's the difference between politics and statesmanship. Mark Carney's Asia tour was more than a foreign visit. It was the culmination of Canada's quiet revolution, a moment where diplomacy, maturity, and principle combine to redefine what global respect truly means. By apologizing for a provincial misstep while strengthening ties across Asia, Carney showed that Canada leads with conscience, not confrontation. And in an age defined by chaos and ego, his calm leadership has made Canada the country everyone wants to talk to, and every major power wants to work with. Because when others act out of ego, Canada acts out of principle. And that's why today the world is listening and watching Canada differently. You're watching Canada Newsline, bringing you depth, direction, and clarity in every story. Subscribe to stay informed as this new chapter in Canada's global journey unfolds.